Hello, friends. Uncle Marv here with the IT Business Podcast, and I've got another special newscast for you. If you've been paying attention, so I've recently had newscast featuring the lawsuits that have been happening to MSPs over the last few months. Most notably, we've had Entirety that was sued by their client. There was the law firm a year ago, Mastagni Holstedt, that sued their MSP LandTech. And then the other lawsuit is, let me pull up my notes here. Barry Dunn and Reliable Networks had a lawsuit. That one is of special note because there was just recently a $7.25 million settlement with that. And this held both the client and the MSP liable for those damages. Now, I don't have access to the legal documents, so I can't tell you how much, each side has to pay. But apparently, they felt that it was pretty significant that both parties would be held responsible for it. So it's been interesting. So I've had discussions with people. We've had some people on the show. I now want to get a different perspective and talk, not just more about what this means for MSPs, but what does it also mean for vendors in our space as these lawsuits are starting to include both. So I've asked a good friend to come on the show. So Tim Golden with Compliance Scorecard is going to join me here. And Tim, of course, his company is in a unique position because we come to you to do a lot of our stuff. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, Uncle Marv, thanks for having me back. Always enjoy the time. And I keep gutting to remember to make sure that I bring you one of my fancy pants Yetis. Are you going to be at PAX 8 Beyond?
I will be at PAX 8 Beyond. I will be at PAX 8, yep.
All right, great. Because I think I have, I do. I see it over there. I have one brandy new Yeti left.
There we go.
So it was very limited special edition run. I know how much you love your mugs and stuff. And I only drink out of Yetis when it comes to like a travel mug. And so I got a few of them when the special blue color came out. And now you can't get them. So
yeah, and sound like a little coffee snob there. I only
drink out of Yetis. I am. So, but Yetis are the best mugs in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tim, we didn't go into too much detail, but I know you've heard about these lawsuits and stuff. Let me first ask your thoughts and opinions about what's been happening lately.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, I don't even know well, I do know where to start, right? Let me just move this out of the way because I did have some notes. Thank you for sending me a little bit of cheat sheet in the beginning, right? So let's just kind of level set, right? MSPs are not just the IT support guy anymore, person, human, whatever.
Right.
We are now the de facto security team, compliance advisor, business continuity. We are all things. If electricity flows through it, our customer as an MSP just assumes we're doing it. So there's two key components of that. Number one, we are the de facto person. Number two, our customers just assume that we do it, whether we are or not.
Right.
And we can kind of get into, and this is kind of where we're going to flow. It's not surprising that lawsuits are happening. These symptoms, these things, the stuff, these lines have been really blurred on expectations for years because the lack of formal boundaries, which include MSA, scopes of work, and all that fun legal mumbo jumbo stuff. Because, I'm an MSP and I borrowed an agreement from a friend of mine and I copy pasta company name and I'm good. No, you're not. And that's how we're seeing things like the Barry Dunn getting them sucked into these conversations and these suits and these stuff.
Yeah. And that one is really interesting because if I remember correctly, they weren't necessarily doing cybersecurity services, but they got pulled into that. And that's something where I don't know what their agreements were. I don't know if they had an agreement that we are doing X, Y, Z, but not A, B, C, or if they just didn't have an agreement. So, well, if you didn't have an agreement, it's assumed you're doing it, so that's how you're getting pulled in. So, the detailed agreements that we have need to be right on point. And like you said, copying and pasting somebody else's agreement may not work for you.
Yeah. Well, probably 100 times out of 10, it is not going to work because it's probably written for a different jurisdiction in which your business is, your customer's business, and so on and so on and so forth. Right. So let's just say it, right, Uncle Marv.
Say it.
If you're an MSP and you haven't reviewed your MSA at least annually and worked with an actual MSP lawyer or legal firm that knows our space, then you could imagine you're going to get sucked into all of these things. So put a tickler on your calendar. It is halfway through the year. Yay, June 1st. It's a good opportunity for you to put a tickler that says, go review my MSA, get it done with legal, and then start approaching your customers with, hey, this is our agreement, and make sure that you put that on some kind of annual cadence so that it is getting updated with the latest, greatest laws and revisions year after year after year.
So
period. That's it. Hands down. If you're not reviewing your legal agreement with a law firm, you probably shouldn't be in business. Period.
Okay.
I'll just say.
Let me ask a different perspective, because you're in a unique situation where a lot of times we'll come to you to say, help us with our compliance. Give us the give us the checklist that we can give to them. And in some cases, an MSP will say, well, I don't want to do it. I want to pay you to do it.
Yeah.
And just like, reliable networks where, Acronis got pulled into their lawsuit because of a backup issue.
Yep.
If a client starts to sue an MSP because they say, hey, you were supposed to keep us compliant, and the MSP says, well, Compliance Scorecard was doing that for us. Now, I'm not saying that that has happened or will happen, but from your perspective, sitting in that seat, how does that make you feel?
Sitting in the seat. Damn, I'm in the hot seat again. Yeah. So, all right. Again, it goes right to our terms and conditions, our end user license agreement, all the legalese that are in place because we work with Eric Tildes, for example, to put all those legalese in places and making sure that we are doing our own due diligence with disclaimers and all the other things, backed up by good tech E&O and cyber liability insurance. So, platform, obviously we're doing our due diligence to make sure we're safe and secure and all the things in solid software development lifecycle. Terms and conditions like, hey, this is the guardrails that we are responsible for, right? The system will be up, you'll be able to log in, blah, 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 blah. Everything outside of that is outside of scope. So scoping out well, they're doing it for us. No. We're giving you a method to manage the work yourself. Bigger, better, faster. That's on the platform side. As you know, because, I think I actually announced it with you, Uncle Marv. We acquired Privacy MSP, brought in Brian Blakely's MSP to build out a professional services division here at Compliance Scorecard. So that is the actual I do, you do, we do model. So we are actually doing the work for you. And that particular set of services has a completely separate set of terms, conditions, statement of work, guardrails, and exact details of, more importantly, what we're not doing, and specifically what we are doing. Hey, we're going to deliver you, the mug and the pencil and the phone. That's the scope of work. And if you start yelling at us because your car gets a flat, the car tire wasn't in the scope of work, right? And so in the pro services side, much like an MSP should be doing, a well-defined terms and conditions, master service agreement, and specific scope of work that says, we're doing these three things and only these three things. And anything that doesn't talk about those three things is out of scope and out of purview.
All right.
So the lesson to the MSP there is make sure you're scoping your work appropriately, and more importantly, scoping stuff out and clearly communicating to your customer, I don't do that. Or so-and-so does that.
Right. Absolutely. I want to go back and correct myself here. I just got a note in my ear. I mistakenly named the wrong company. It was the LandTech company
Okay.
that was alleged to have a failure in protecting the cloud backups. And then ransomware actors got a hold of that, and Acronis was drug into that suit. So I want to make sure that I say that here. LandTech was a completely different thing there. And then let's see. I just want to make sure I get my things. In entirety was the healthcare situation where they were accused of not having an up-to-date infrastructure and out-of-date software, and they also failed to provide services during a ransom attack. So get that clear there. So you of course laid out the very basics of, in the beginning, you've got to have everything set out properly, ducks in a row, I's dotted, T's crossed. But it seems as though some of these agreements, for instance, one of the cases, they started in 2018. Here we are, 2025. You mentioned revisiting the MSAs on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But you should also revisit the scope of work on a regular basis as well to add new services or exclude new services if they choose not to do them. You know, if we want to introduce MFA and the customer says no, well, you have to decide, do you want to still deal with that customer, or is there a way that you can put a liability waiver in there and say, look, we told you need to do this. We handed you the food and you said, no, I don't want to eat. Those sorts of things.
I mean, that's what happened with LandTech, right? They had, backups failed. They had no FA. Like, it was a big old legal mumbo jumbo, right? They assumed MFA was in place, right? It's freaking 2025. Why are we still talking about multi-factor? Darn it. Okay. But you make the point about revisiting what's in scope and what's not in scope. Now, I'm going to put my MSP hat on here for a minute, which I'd like to do when we chat. Well, we would have a 1-year contract with our customers as our MSP. It was never really a 1-year contract per se. We built in buffers. We built in stuff that said, hey, your monthly price is $1. Okay, I'm speaking facetiously. You're going to be charged a monthly $1, $1 a month for up to 100 seats, whatever, the numbers. And then if they went to 101 or 98 or 207 or whatever, at the end of that quarter, wherever they were at that particular time of seats and units, or however you're doing your billing, we were doing a unit. A unit was 1 human, 1 device. If they had 1 human and 3 devices, that was 4. So wherever the unit price is, and we would let them ride that for a quarter. As part of the business and technology business review each quarter, we would true up, which means not only we would true up pricing, but we would true up contract and start the date for 1 year all over again. So I essentially had a 1 quarter contract that was a year's worth written, but we would almost renew it every single quarter, which would allow us to go from $1 an endpoint to $2 an endpoint to $10 an endpoint to $50 an endpoint. Eventually getting, we were charging $325 per unit per month. So as an MSP, if you just bake that into part of your process and making sure that your agreements and your statement of works are being reviewed on a quarterly basis, A, it can drive revenue, and B, it will cover your butt.
It's an interesting concept to have that rolling agreement. Very nice.
Yeah, obviously we were transparent about that. The contract was 1 year, but we would review it every quarter and adjust it accordingly. Because I had some companies, they went from 5 people to over 150 people in a year. Now, if I didn't talk to them and I was only billing them 5 units, I'd have been screwed. Right. But because I met with, well, in their case, it was every month and I had bigger buffers, I would have been up the creek with charging for 150 seats, but only billing for 5.
Right.
Conversely, when they downsized and they went from 150 staff to 20 in a week, I had to readjust because I was overbilling.
Yeah. Yep. I just had that conversation yesterday with one of my clients that has been shrinking is probably the easiest way to put it. But when you shrink 50 seats, in 6 months, that's interesting. So had that conversation. Price doesn't change, just the number of seats that we're billing you changed.
So as we dig into this breaking news and the lawsuits and stuff like that, there were 3 or 4 that you specifically pointed out. I know there's a new one that you were just talking about earlier in the green room.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to bring that one up. Let's do one thing though, because I want to get to the Barry Dunn and the settlement there. The fact that it's a $7.25 million settlement. The key takeaway that I get from that is this was a case where an MSP was providing basic IT services, but they are being held partially liable for a breach despite not offering cybersecurity services. So that is pretty telling because a lot of times we used to try to separate out, well, that's not us, that's not us, that's not us. But the bottom line is it's our network. And so if it touches the network, it has to be us.
So this is a pretty unique case. Well, I wouldn't say it's unique. It's similar in a lot of ways, right? So, and this hits close to home because it was in Maine and I live in New Hampshire. It's kind of down the street when you think of New England. And, as an accounting firm doing, having access to all those records, right? So, FTC safeguards, GLBA, all data privacy, the things. Not having that clear delineation. Well, I did this I'm going to do this to you. I did it to our good friend Eric Anthony last night.
Okay.
Uncle Marv, can you define cybersecurity for me? What is cybersecurity?
I can't define it specifically.
And therein lies the problem with our industry as a whole. I bet if I went to the big influencers and the known people, and I asked them the same question, they would stumble just like I did, just like you did, just like Eric did, just like everybody that I've asked that question to in the last couple of months.
It is one of those weird ones because generally speaking, cybersecurity is protecting your network against threats. And that's how
what about the humans? What about the data? What about the backups? What about
AI?
What about AI? Right. So if we as an industry can't even define it and agree on a definition amongst ourselves, how can we as an MSP and community expect our customers to know that answer? How can a Barry Dunn who has an IT company saying, yeah, they do cybersecurity for us? Well, what is cybersecurity? Right. And herein lies the problem. And I could say the same thing about compliance or risk or any of those other things, what we as an industry have done really well over the last 10 or 15 years is IT operations. Uncle Marv, define IT operations.
Okay, I can't even describe that because it depends on who I'm talking to.
True.
Right.
It's network management, it's endpoint management, it's dealing with the hardware and the software and the firewalls, it's operating the IT network, right?
Yeah,
We can
but
probably get
I don't do
here.
phones and they're on the network.
Sure. So we're really good at dealing with the operations of technology. The protection and the security and the cyber components we can't even define what the hell that means.
No, and I think part of it is that it changes on us. I mean, 10 years ago, we weren't really thinking about ransomware the way we are today. We weren't thinking of phishing, business email compromise. Our backups were completely different. We were still, a lot of people were still using tapes. Let's be honest about that. Back in 2015,
I was still using tapes when I left the MSP in 2022.
Okay. I'm sure they were DAT style tapes and not the older, right?
Oh, no, DLP.
DLP, okay.
DLP, DL, like actually have a box of them sitting over there.
Yeah.
And yes. The old Dell, the hell where is it? And I'll even Veritas, backup exec.
Oh, yes. I've used that myself many times.
Mm-hmm. It was still running when I left, and Symantec bought it. And all right, I don't want to. I'm going to share this with you after the fact. Hold on, stop, turn this off. So you say ransomware is a newer thing, right? And I'll share.
No, it's not new. It's not newer. It's evolved.
It's evolved.
I mean,
so back in 2015, I put a YouTube video up on my YouTube channel about how your system gets infected with a virus. Went to Google, did a search, clicked on the first link, and poof, my machine was infected. No, it wasn't, but it was that fake screen that looks like your Windows Explorer with the little, you know what I'm talking about. This stuff goes back to 15 plus years ago when I posted that story.
Yeah.
I'll share that with you. You can choose to, whether or not you want to do that. And maybe you don't, because it's my personal YouTube channel, but you are correct. Ransomware has evolved. Now, with artificial intelligence and large language and social engineering tied to all of that, it's only going to get worse. So the component of an MSP being sucked into a lawsuit and culpable is only going to get worse. And you hear me and us talk a lot about defensibility, right?
Yep.
That's the thing. How can we defend our position on whatever? Defensibility. Hey, we told our customer MFA everywhere. And we showed them where it can be enabled. And we even provided them a path to enable it in their backups, their accounting, their this, their that, their this. We gave them a roadmap for enforcing, as opposed to enabling, multi-factor everywhere we could. You know what? They didn't do it. I did my diligence. I'm an MSP. I found the weaknesses. I explained that to them. And here's where they said no. Okay, I've done my due diligence, due care, and defensibility. Now, when the crap hits the fan, and like Barry and Dunn, an incident happens, sensitive data goes out, I can pull back and show them, look, this is what I did. This is how I tried to defend our position and built that defensibility.
The story I like to tell is we're looking at it from the standpoint of you want to protect your home, and I will help you install the alarm, put in extra
Mhm.
locks.
Mhm.
We'll even lock the door when we leave.
Yeah.
But if you go behind us and unlock the door and never use the alarm,
Yeah.
whose fault is it?
That's a great, great. You know me. I love my analogies. I might have to borrow that one. But
I
yeah,
like it.
exactly. And Desiree on our team kind of uses a similar one. Like Uncle Marvin, that scenario, you have surveillance, an alarm, and locked door, and triple bolts, and a guard dog, and weapons, and a tank. You've done everything, and you've taken that house and you've actually put it in the 500-mile woods. Perfect. But if you take that exact same house and you drop it in the middle of, the Bronx or Chicago or highly populated area, and you put a pile of gold on the front door step inside the door where there's glass and people can see it, and you don't lock the door, you don't turn the alarm, like, of course, the risk is much greater.
All right. If you live in the Bronx or any of those places, send your email to Tim at.
I just picked highly populated areas, not particular areas for reference.
Listen, I'd put Miami in that conversation. Why
Yeah,
don't
Miami.
go down there?
Yeah. Heck, I'd put Boston in that conversation.
All right. So I think the bottom line that we've said it enough that clients are increasingly holding their MSP legally accountable for
Mhm.
cybersecurity failures. The courts are starting to back them up. So we need to do all of our due diligence beforehand and ongoing to make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to do, doing what we say that we're doing,
Mhm.
because that's the worst thing is for the customer to assume you're doing it
Yes.
because on the invoice, you're billing us for this. If you're billing us, we assume that you're doing it. So Tim,
Exactly.
let me give you a quick minute to describe Compliance Scorecard, because there probably will be some people that watch this video that don't know who you are or who Compliance Scorecard is. So,
Thank you.
in a short elevator pitch, tell us about it.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Tim Golden, founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard, where we help you, the MSP, have the risk conversation with your customer, whether it's through our SaaS compliance platform and the scorecards that go with it, or it's through our professional services where we can walk alongside you, with you, for you, I do, you do, or our Kickstart Bootcamp to get you up and running from zero to hero in 12 short weeks.
Sounds like you were a part of that Pitch It program for the IT Nation there.
I've gotten pretty good at delivering our pitch.
All right. Well, Tim, thank you very much for taking the time to share the stage with me here and for being open to talking
Thank
about
you.
a topic where, I think sometimes we don't want to admit these things are happening, but they are.
Mhm.
And we need to talk about them and help each other prepare. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on. If I could leave our MSP audience with one nugget, that would be look at your MSA scope of work and statements of work and make sure you're reviewing them with legal at least once annually, if not more frequently. Period.
Good tip. Good tip. All right, folks, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the IT Business Podcast. We'll be back with more, and we'll see you soon. And until then, holla.
Holla.